Welcome to the webinar for DP-201. I'm Nimisha and I'll be the host for today. We are hosting a webinar to help everyone to prepare for the Azure Data Engineer certification. Prarthit Mehta will be speaker for the webinar today. Prarthit is working as Cloud Solution Architect with Cloud Technologies. I hope you have a great session. Handing over to you, Prarthit.
Thank you, Nimisha. So welcome to the DP-201 certification prep webinar. Let me start talking about myself. I am Prarthit Mehta. I am working as a cloud solutions architect with Cloud Technologies. I have over 8 years of experience in tech and 5 years on cloud and AI/ML domain. Right. I am a Microsoft certified trainer. I have ample number of certificates with respect to Microsoft for Azure, Azure AI, Azure Data, Azure Data Scientists, Azure Data Engineer, and Azure Infrastructure with respect to Azure. Apart from the Azure Cloud, I am also certified on AWS Cloud, right? Feel free to scan the QR code on your screen to connect to me on LinkedIn. Let us see what we are going to talk about today, right? This particular webinar is for the people who are planning to prepare and planning to appear for the DP-201 examination, right? We are going to talk about what DP-201 examination is about, what are the prerequisites for the examinations, what certification will you achieve from the examination. We'll also talk about some quick refreshers about the exam, and we'll try to end with sample questions and Q&A. Okay. This particular DP-201 examination is focused to get a Data Engineer Associate certification by Azure. This is the second level of examination. You only get Azure Data Engineer Associate level certification if you clear the DP-200 and DP-201 both, right? If you want to get a hands on how my DP-201 looks like, or how DP-200 preparation is, or how DP-201 examination I have to, before DP-201 examination, if I want to, how should I clear DP-200 examination? You can very well look at the webinar that we did last week. You can get in touch with us. You can look at the webinar that we did last week for DP-200 and prepare for DP-200 as well. Right, so let's jump into the DP-201 examination and what are the general scenarios of or general information about the examination. This particular examination is targeted towards audience that work closely with business stakeholders to identify and meet the data requirements, to design Azure data solutions. Someone who's already Azure data engineers who are responsible for data related design tasks that include designing storage solutions like relational and non-relational data stores, batch and real-time data processing, security and compliance with respect to data, right? If you want to attend this particular exam, you must design data solutions that use Azure services such as Cosmos DB, SQL database, Synapse Analytics, Data Lake Storage, Data Factory, the Stream Analytics, the Azure Data Bricks, and most importantly, the blob storage of the Azure, right? Let's see how the exam is shaped, and then we'll talk about what type of services are needed, right? So this particular exam has almost 60 questions. You can have a buffer of plus or minus 10 questions for this. The exam time is of 180 minutes. Now, out of this 180 minutes, there are 30 minutes of survey which is included. So you have to make sure that your exam time would be between 150 to 180 minutes, right? The difficulty level of the question is actually average. There is not too much of expert level designs that will be given to you, and there will not be too much easier level questions will be given to you. The questions will be of multiple difficulty level, right? The passing percentage is approximately 70 over a brief period when DP-201 have been live. Me and my team members have continuously attended the examinations, and we have seen that the passing percentage varies mostly per examination, but it is in ballpark range of 720. So Microsoft grades each and every examination between 100 to 1000 marks, and yeah, here in your between your 100 and 1000 marks, we have seen that on an average 720 to 700 is the range where your passing criteria is sitting, right? So your passing criteria again is approximately 70%. This exam can be taken at testing center or it can be taken virtually on your own machine. Now, given the COVID-19 scare and to battle COVID-19, nowadays everybody is working from home, right? This is the best time to spend some time reading, revising the content and actually appearing from the for the exam. You need not go to the test center. You did not worry about going out on the roads. You can actually sit at your own home and give the exam using the self-proctored or online proctored mode that has been offered by PSI, right? Let's see some of the question types that are associated with this examination. This particular examination will have multiple type of questions, right? There will be multiple choices question where you have to choose one or more answers for a particular question. You can actually choose, there will be questions for fill in the blanks, drop down, you'll have questions for reordering and sorting, you'll have questions where you'll have to drag and drop module from left to right in the correct fashion, right? You also get a particular set of questions where you do not have ability to actually go back in the previous question. Now, these are very tricky kind of questions with the questions will look exactly similar, but it tests your requirement gathering technique, right? Like it judges you on how closely you read a particular question, right? Once the answer is given for this particular type of question, and if you click on next, you have no ability to go back to the previous question and change the answer, right? And the last type of question that we have seen in the examination are diagram based questions. Now we'll see a sample of this kind of question slide at very end of the deck, but it gives you a diagram. To give a nutshell, it gives a architecture diagram and it will ask that for this architecture diagram, what would be your suggestion? Suggestions can be with respect to getting the compliance, suggestions can be with respect to batch processing, your suggestions may refer to real-time processing, what kind of service will you use? Such questions might come, but the questions will be based on the diagram that is been given. So you also have to be very, very cautious in reading the diagram, right? This exam costs you 4,800 rupees plus the GST. If you are in India, if you are outside of India, you can go to Microsoft's DP-201 exam slide or exam web page, and you can actually get your region-wise pricing. The certification is valid for 2 years. Okay, and after 2 years, you either have to recertify or give the upgraded level of certification. Now we stay in fast growing society. 2 years are enough, and in 2 years there will be a hell lot of things that will get changed, right? The top services that is asked in this particular examination is your Azure storage account, your Azure Data Lake Gen 2, your Cosmos DB, your SQL database, your ability basically to architect these services will be the major focus in this particular exam. Where you can give the exam, as I clearly stated earlier as well, you can either go to a Pearson Center or at current time of crisis, you can actually give it at your home, right? Let's move to the next one, right? How this particular learning part of Azure Data Engineer Associate is stated, right? The Azure Data Engineer Associate comprises of two different certification, DP-200 and DP-201. You must pass DP-200 and DP-201 both to achieve the Azure Data Engineer Associate certification. Today we are going to focus on DP-201 examination, where your questions that will come from Azure storage solutions, your ability to architect Azure's data storage solution, your ability to architect the data processing solutions, and your ability to architect with respect to security and compliance of your data, right? The particular certification is focusing on three core areas of judgment, right? The first study area where Microsoft will judge you is on your ability, as I stated earlier, your ability to design the Azure data storage solutions. The weightage of this particular study area is approximately 40 to 45%. So if you really see your ability to use the relational and non-relational databases, your ability to use the blob storages and Cosmos DBs and SQL servers and Synapse Analytics is having a huge and a very major part of your examination will be on that particular area. The next study area that Azure judges for your DP-201 is how well you can architect a solution where the data processing is required. It may be real-time data processing, or it may be a batch data processing where your data is already being kept and you just have to run some scripts, or your Databricks cluster is actually going and modifying things in that particular data, right? The designing data processing solution, the weightage that is given to this particular study area is 25 to 30%. If your examination has 60 questions, approximately 15 to 18 questions will be there from this particular segment, right? And the last segment where Azure judges or Microsoft judges you with respect to DP-201 is your capability to design the data solutions, be it storage or processing, keeping security and compliance into account. In here, questions may come such as how will you do, whether you should do data masking or you should do encryption, right? What will you recommend? Will you recommend data masking in this scenario or encryption in this scenario, right? Such questions will show up in your examination for designing data security and compliance segment. Again, this segment weighs somewhere around 25 to 30%, similar to the previous segment. This segment also will have 15 to 18 questions for your DP-201 examination, right? Now, just a caution that I would like to give that DP-201 is changing from 26th of March. So people who are willing to attempt the exam from 26th of March, there is one area or one sub point in the particular area which is being changed, that is part of your data processing solutions. They are now including the data processing, data transformation of Databricks from that's a single topic addition in your DP-201 from 26th of March, where they'll add processing that can be data processing and data transformations that can be done using Azure Databricks. Okay, let's talk about each and every study area in a little brief, correct? Let's jump to the first study area, that is your ability to design Azure storage solutions. This particular area is divided into three major aspects. One is the questions will be somewhere where you have to recommend a data storage solution. You have to design a non-relational data store, or you will have to design a relational data store. But to achieve any of these three, there are several aspects of architecting a solution that you must keep in mind, right? That cloud architectures works on shared responsibility model, right? Where you can say the pillars of the architecture, be it security, be it performance and scalability, be it efficiency and operations, or be it availability and recoverability, is both ours and Azure's job, correct? We should be focusing on our job, and we must focus on all these four areas to achieve and to design the best kind of architecture, right? Let's look at some of them which me and my team have seen that question arises or question comes from them in a very regular fashion, right? The first one being security, very important and very focused for Microsoft nowadays. Every certification of Microsoft has one or the other way of checking how the compliance, how security is for your data. So what Microsoft has done is divided this security for your application in 7 different layers, right? Starting from physical security till the data security, right? We must keep in mind that physical security for this particular setup on Azure is Microsoft Azure's responsibility. They will make sure that there are multiple checks before anybody can touch the servers where your virtual machine or where your data solutions are hosted, correct? But providing access to those virtual hardware, right, to those SQL servers, to those Cosmos DB tables, that identity and access stays in our pocket, right? Who will have what kind of access, who can make what API calls, which particular Azure user has what role on the platform, on the Azure portal. These are some of the major aspects of identity and access management. We must keep that in mind, that the more the less the permission, the better the security, right? So we must architect with least privilege concept, where you do not provide permission to a particular user unless he absolutely needs it, right? The third layer is your parameter security, which is more or less again Azure's per se, the physical layer of networking, the physical network layer, the physical layer of security. Perimeter security is something that Azure will take care of. Then network again comes to our pocket. Your virtual networks where your database is hosted, your virtual networks where your storage account is connected to, your virtual network where you have created your Databricks cluster. This all sits in your pocket. Your back is where the network security comes into picture. You should make sure that your security groups are only allowing the ports which are required, are only allowing those traffic from specific IP addresses from where our machines are going to access those Databricks clusters or those Cosmos DB servers, right? Thus, this network layer of security again sits in our pocket. And anything below this predominantly is our job, right? With respect to compute, again, it's a shared responsibility where the physical hardware and security of the physical hardware is Azure's job, whereas the virtual machines, that is our job, right? The virtual infrastructure that we are going to create is our job as far as the compute is concerned. In this particular respect, in DP-201, you should focus on the Databricks clusters, your data factory pipelines, wherever your compute node is coming into picture, your Synapse analytics, right? You take care of access security on those particular compute nodes, right? Finally, the two layer comes in where it's all our job. Your application is the major part where you need to worry about the security, right? Your application must be having a way of encrypting the data while storing, decrypting the data after reading it. Your application must not, and this is a very important aspect, your application must not use any kind of static or hard-coded passwords, right? This is a very important key, right? You should not store any of your mission critical secrets in your application. Instead, use Azure Vault and try to utilize Azure Vault secrets from Azure Vault to keep your or manage your secrets, right? Or use a role-based access control where you provide your application to create a service account and use the service account key to have access to some other service, right? Make sure your application does not have a hard-coded credential, right? The last segment of security is the data, right? You must keep in mind that when you are designing a particular architecture, the security of your data, be it in transit or at rest, is your responsibility. You need to make sure that you take care of every layer where your data is being transmitted from one layer to another. It is secure with respect to your transit. That means you must use the SSL or TLS connections when two machines are talking or your data is moving from, let's say, your data storage for your real-time processing to your stream analytics or for your batch processing to your Synapse analytics. The connection between your database and your Synapse analytics must be TLS protected, right? The data that you store on your blob storage or your Cosmos DB or your data lake storage, that also needs to be encrypted at rest, right? You can utilize again Azure Vault to rotate the encryption keys, or you can utilize your own encryption keys and your application should encrypt the data and then store it in the Azure Blob Storage or Data Lake Storage or Cosmos DB or your SQL database server, right? So that's about considerations that you must keep with respect to designing for security. Let's move to the next pillar of your concrete architecture with respect to data is your designing for performance and scalability, right? Here you must take care of two major aspects: scaling, when to scale up and when to scale out, and performance on how to optimize the network storage, how to optimize the input outputs, how to optimize the partitioning of your database, right? So there are some best practices with respect to your partitioning, scaling, and caching, correct? For partitioning, you must divide your data in multiple partitions, but you must choose your partition key accurately. If you choose your partition key in an incorrect manner, your query may go for a toss, right? So choosing partition key plays a major vital role, right? How will you choose partition key? Make sure you keep in mind the where clause, right? When you are querying your database in your application, the where clause is the one that will help you decide what partition key to choose, right? Think of all the queries that has where clause and see which is the major key that you are using in every one of them, right? And choose that as your partition key. That will improve your performance and your query time will reduce, right? With respect to scaling, there are two major aspects that you should keep in mind. Either you scale up or you scale out, right? So now scaling up is an action of adding more resources to the same instance. And this usually requires a little bit of downtime. If you have something that is balancing the load between multiple instances, you can actually do scale out. This is where the clustering concepts comes into picture, where you scale out and control node will be able to take care of people coming in and out, right? Like requests coming in and out of your database, right? So scale out is adding multiple instances in a particular set of cluster, right? So you must think of the measurements or the criterias on where you are going to automatically scale or you are going to do the scaling manually. Scale out is something that can be achieved using automation. Scale up is something where you will require a little bit of manual intervention, right? And the last and most important part for this performance and scalability is your caching mechanism, right? Your caching mechanism plays vital role in your application's response time, your data queries response time. You must cache frequently used assets such as your images of your website or web pages, or to be very honest, your frequently accessed queries also can be cached, right? If you cached your frequently accessed queries, you would see that your application performance slowly improving in a very good manner, right? Correct. Let's look at the next pillar for your uh, best architecture, right? Or architectural consideration. The next pillar is availability and recoverability, right? You must design your data solution for availability and recoverability, right? You must focus on maintaining the uptime through small scale incidents and temporary conditions such as network outage, right? How will you make sure that if there is a network outage in a particular region due to any unforeseen circumstances, how your application will still get the data, right? You can achieve it using globally distributed databases like Cosmos DB to creating replicas of your storage account in multiple places so that you can copy it from your storage account, right? And the recoverability, again, recoverability is a very important part. One of our senior members said that everything is bound to fail given a point of time, right? At given point of time, everything is bound to fail. So you must keep in mind what would be your recovery point objective and what would be your recovery time objective. Now, these are majorly known in the industry as RTOs and RPOs, where RPO stands for recovery point objective, which is the maximum amount or maximum duration of acceptable data loss. So if you consider recovery point objective as 1 hour, you are telling the data engineers, or as architect, you are telling the engineers that, okay, I am okay losing the data for 1 hour, right? This is a this is something, this is a parameter that you must discuss again and again with the business stakeholders and make sure that you have the accurate requirements stated. Okay. And then there is recovery time objective. The recovery time objective refers to the maximum amount of acceptable downtime, right? So if you decide that your RTO is for 1 hour, if a severe incident happens where your database is down or your data solution is down, you are letting the engineers know that I am okay for 1 hour if you spend 1 hour in getting my database back or my data solution back, right? That is your recovery time objective, correct? So let's move to the next important aspect with designing your architecture, right? This has, again, I try to repeat myself, this has 40 to 45% of weightage. We are still going through the first study criteria, which is your designing your Azure data storage solutions and what should be the considerations to do so. We have seen security best practice for your solution. We have seen performance and scalability best practices. We have talked about availability and recoverability. And now we are going to talk about design for efficiency and operations. Now, this is an area which focuses on how will you reduce the cost while achieving the best performance of your data solution, right? Now, efficiency is focused on identifying and eliminating waste, the additional capability in your environment, right? As Azure is a pay-as-you-go model, right? This particular criteria helps us release the resources when not required and increase the resources when the demand starts increasing again, right? What will it do? It will make sure that your organization is not wasting any operational cost when the resources are lying around. There are several best practices that you must keep in mind with respect to efficiency. Correct? You must monitor your compute, your data storage when you're utilizing any resource, right? You should and you must ensure that you are not wasting any of these resources, right? With respect to operation, you should think of automating everything, right? If you consider my advice as a word, anything, any task that your team is performing more than once is a candidate to be automated, right? And the most costly affair or most cost increasing element is a human, right? With respect to any architecture, right? It also brings in a little bit of human error. If you have everything automated, things will be more smooth and more streamlined, right? You can use that human resource that you have pulled out from a manual task to build new automation and to administer new resources for newer architectures, right? So make sure that you follow the thought process of anything that is to be performed more than twice is a automation candidate, right? With that, I conclude the first section, which is your designing your data storage solution and what are the most important considerations that you must keep in mind while designing the storage solutions. I'll again reiterate upon it. Security, which is a major and vital point. Performance and scaling. Efficiency and operations, and availability and recoverability. These are the four pillars for the best data storage solution design, right? Let's go to the next topic where your 25 to 30% of the weightage is given in the examination, right? Which is your designing batch processing solutions and designing real-time processing solutions. You must keep in mind that the services that you will be using in these two criteria will be Databricks, Data Factory, and your Stream Analytics. The questions that may come surrounding how will you design or how will you use Data Factory to migrate your data or to transfer your data or to load your data from your databases or your blob storages to Synapse Analytics and then passing it to your Azure Analytics service or Power BI for further visualization. You'll need to figure out the optimal data ingestion method for a batch processing solution. We'll see how many ways you can ingest the data in a couple of slides later, right? You must keep in mind that where the processing should be taken place, whether the processing should be done at destination, at source, or you want to process it in transit. When you process your data in transit, it more or less becomes a real-time solution where your data is in transit, is ingested by someone, you are analyzing it in transit and producing it to the analytics service, right? And that's where you need to worry about how much of a compute that you will provision for your real-time data processing solution, right? Here is a sample block diagram on how your data processing solution works. Your data sources will ingest the data in with respect to batch processing. It will ingest the data into the storage solution that you have designed. From your storage solution, then there will be some processing done, the batch processing, which will be then given to the analytical data store and can be produced to analytical and reporting charts. The another way your data source can behave or your processing can behave is your data source is actually ingesting data to the real-time message ingestion using your event hubs or IoT hubs, right? And can send it to your stream processing, which is your stream analytics, and again can be given to your analytical data store and then be presented to your reporting. With both, when the data is being processed, you can actually incorporate Azure's machine learning service or machine learning capabilities with Databricks to either predict something and provide it to the analytical data store, or to predict something and store it into batch data store, right? Let's see what are the two major architectures that are being used with respect to the data processing solutions. The first type of architecture is your Lambda architecture, which more or less consists of two types of paths. The first one being the hot path, which includes the speed layer where your real-time views will be in place to analyze the data in real time, and then that is being sent to the analytics client. An example, if you want to think of, I hope all of you have been traveling in Uber, and some or the other day you must have seen driver's dashboard, right? The driver's application that shows on a real time which area of the city has the most amount of search, right? And that's where the speed layer or the real time views comes into picture, correct? The second path is your cold path, right? In the Lambda architecture, the cold path refers to the batch layer and the serving layer, right? Batch layer is where the master data is sitting and the processing is done. So after the processing is done, the processed data will be given to the serving layer for the batch views. These batch views can also accept data periodically from your real-time views and then can be given to your analytics client to visualize the data, right? The other type of architecture that your data processing solution can have is your Kappa architecture. However, there are not more questions that comes on Kappa architecture. There will be 10% or rather less than 10% of your question will be on Kappa architecture. But your Kappa architecture is based on speed layer and long-term store, right? It is majorly used for your real-time analysis, where you will have hot path with speed layer, where you will do real-time data processing and then show it on your analytics client. At the same given point of time, it mirrors all your data that is been given to your real-time processing in a long-term data store such as your Azure's data lake storage or your blob storage, and it will be there, it will stay there till the time you can actually if you want to recompute something on that data and show it on your analytics dashboard, right? So these are two major architectures that are being used with respect to your data processing solutions, and there is this Lambda architecture which gets more focus on the exam per se, right? Let's see how a Lambda architecture can be implemented with respect to multiple scenarios. Let's go to them one after the other. The first one is where you have data that is being ingested on warm and hot path, both of them, where your warm path has services like Event Hub, Stream Analytics, right? Which consists of your speed layer, where your Event Hub is receiving the data from the processing, and you are actually utilizing Stream Analytics to transform and get some insights out of the data. You keep the data in the analyzed data in a warm storage and send the data periodically to Power BI from that. And you can also pull the data directly from analytics services to the Power BI analytics client, right? Another way is if, let's say, the data same, the service is in creating the data and you are giving it to the batch layer. This is the place where you either give it to Event Hub and Event Hub sends it to the time series insights to generate that time series data and store it in Azure's storage solutions and then show it on your analytics clients, or it just keeps the data on your storage solution. You process the data later and give it to the serving layer, which creates a batch view out of it and then sends it out to your analytics client. In here, we are focusing the analytics client, which is the Power BI, right? Let's move ahead to the next architecture, right? The next one being a small one with just more or less just the real-time data processing architecture, where your data is sent to event hubs. Event hubs will receive the data and then forward the data to multiple stream analytics services, where one of the stream analytics services only getting insights and creating dashboard required data and giving it to Power BI, where Power BI is after visualizing, sending the data back to the warm storage and to store the data. And another analytics service is where you are running some Azure functions to do some post processing of the data after the analyzation is done, and after the analysis is done, and then you can Azure functions are storing the analyzed data in warm storage, right? Okay, let's move to the next architecture, which is our batch processing architecture, correct, where your data is given to the data factory from the traditional storage like your SQL database or your data blob on Azure or your storage devices on premise, right? And data factory pulls the data from there using pipelines and get the warehouse, puts it in the warehouse or gives it to the Azure Databricks cluster to do some machine learning modeling and then send it out to analytics client to display the predicted data or to display the historical data, right? A batch processing solution is when you design a batch processing solution where the question is about processing data at rest. If you have to process the data in transit, your answer should be towards real-time processing, right? So again, this is architecture for your batch processing. Another architecture for your real-time processing is here. And if you want a combined solution where you want a dashboard that does real-time processing as well as your batch processing, then your Lambda architecture would look something like this, where your data streams are sending the data out to 2 or 3 different layers, one being the speed layer where your real-time analysis is done, and the other being the batch layer where your data is stored at rest and then some analytics is done on that, right? Let's move to the last study area of the DP-201 examination. The last study area focuses majorly on your security and compliance, right? Compliance such as GDPR or PCI DSS, on how do you store your data on Azure, right? This particular area consists of 2 subcategories, is where you design the security for your data's access and the designs of your security for data's protection policies and standards, right? Under your source data's access, you would be assessed upon how securely you plan for your storage endpoints. Questions will come surrounding generating shared access identity or SAS, shared access signature for your blob to providing a little time or time bound access on your Cosmos DB table, right? The questions might come on when to choose the access keys or SAS to when to use the Azure AD authentication, right? Okay, The next layer is about designing security and data policies. This is where you will be judged on how your capability of designing encryption for data at rest and in transit, your capability for designing auditing and masking, your capability to design the privacy and classification, your capability to design data's retention policy, and your capability for designing archival strategy of your data based on the business needs, right? For this particular section, I have focused on application security, which more or less covers everything. And then we'll talk about security layer with respect to a particular architecture, right? Your application security is a vital component for this particular segment, right? Your application security is not at the time of deployment of your application, but from the time of designing your application. Your application, you must follow the security development cycle. It should not, from the day zero when you are starting the planning for your application must use encrypted queries to talk to the database. Your application must not have plain text passwords, must store masked PII informations, right? These are some of the major consideration for SDLC, right? Like not software development life cycle, more security development life cycle, right? Another area that you should keep in mind while designing your or architecting your application is operational security. Who are going to be the administrators on your application? Who are going to have what kind of role on your application? What kind of permissions you give to your end users to modify in your application? These are some of the vital concepts for your operational security on your application. You must also keep auditing these things, right? You must set up processes where you are actually auditing permissions granted, right? And the third point also talks about that identity is something that you always focus on giving list privileges, right? Use your identity as a parameter while designing the data solution, right? Let's say if you want to, if I am one of your employee and I am your application user as well as admin, if I am supposed to modify only a particular set of columns, give me access on the database for that particular set of columns only. I should not be able to modify any other columns, right? Or any other tables, right? Correct. Use the identity as another security parameter on your application, right? The next one is the protection of your data, how you encrypt your data when your application is collecting the data and your application is forwarding the data to the data store, how you ingest your data when your application is how the data is there is sent in transit while your application is ingesting the data. You must also keep in mind, as I stated earlier, I am repeating it again, that your key and secret to look at your storage, to read from your storage, to write in your storage should not be hard coded in your application, right? Your design should be such a manner that your storage keys are either, instead of identity and access keys or account keys of your storage account, you actually generate SAS for your storage account. To be very honest, for a storage container within your storage account and use it in your application, right? The next slide is where I am talking about, I have an architecture and we'll be looking at how the architecture is secured, right? This particular architecture refers to where my data is there on premise. I have orchestration done via Azure Data Factory, and I am pulling the data, ingesting the data to first blob storage, then taking the data from blob storage to my Synapse Analytics, and from my Synapse Analytics, I am reading the data from the analytics services to produce the charts and visualizations on my Power BI, right? Correct. So in here, the first thing that you would notice is that the data is transiting from on-premise to Azure. This transition is done with the security of data in transit. So the data that is being ingested is using Azure's APIs to push the data from on-premise to Azure, and Azure's REST APIs are by default using the transit layer security. They are all HTTPS or SSL protected APIs, which will be ingesting the data to the storage section, right? My data factory will then need access to my storage blob to read the data from the blob and send it to my Synapse Analytics or my SQL data warehouse. For that, I have used the account's shared access key, which gives my data factory time-bound access with a particular signature, right? So shared access signature is something that I have used, right? Which provides my data factory access of my storage blob, and I have used Azure AD authentication for my data factory so that it can ingest the data in my SQL data warehouse. If after that my data needs to be processed and passed to my analytics services, where again I am utilizing Azure's Active Directory to authenticate every request that my analytics service is making to SQL database, as well as on my visualization dashboard. I also have there is an arrow missing in the diagram, but on my visualization dashboard as well, I have done a single sign-on based authentication using my Active Directory so that no unauthorized user has access on my Power BI dashboard, right? This is where every layer security is important, right? This is with respect to the authentication and authorization security. Something that is not visible on the diagram, but is there in my architecture is encryption of the data at rest, right? Whenever the data is being ingested from my on-premise to my Azure blob storage, I have a TDE done on my blob storage, which encrypts the data that is sitting in my blob storage. And the same transparent data encryption is done with my secure data warehouse, SQL data warehouse as well, where the data coming from your blob, my blob storage to my warehouse is actually encrypted and stored, right? With respect to PII data, as it's a warehouse, it will have all kinds of data. With respect to PII data, I am utilizing data masking so that if an unauthorized user, someone who's not an admin, wants to read the data, he can see that the data is there, but the data will be masked for him, right? Given an example, let's say a reader came and wants to see whether or not email column under user table is having any kind of data. He does not need to know what is the email address of the person, right, of the record, but he needs to know whether data is there or not. In that case, I as admin, I have masked that column, so the reviewer will be able to see that there is data, but a partial fragments of email will be shown to him, right? Fragments using which he cannot actually compose a particular email address. Okay, so if I say that there is an email address which is sales@cloudnet.in, there will be most of the characters in this particular string will be replaced by X that will mask those characters, and it will be very difficult for the viewer to actually come up with the email address, right? So that's about security and compliance. You must take care of authentication, authorization, and the encryption at rest. right? When it comes to the DP-201 examination, right? That's where I end all the study areas. Let's move ahead to the next one. How would you prepare for, or what are the ways you can prepare for the examination? One which you have already taken, which is the classroom training by MCTs like me and partners like CloudEdge who provides that, right? You can actually find so many details on your exam page. Your exam page is actually linked here. Is your, you can go to docs.microsoft.com/learn/certification/dp201 and you can see the exam related. You can find what are the skills measured there. You can find what are the training options that you have, and you can schedule your exam. Microsoft Learn is another self-based or self-paced course training where you can go ahead and look for modules and learning path that aligns to DP-201. You can attend, again, as I said, you have already, but those who have not can opt to attend classroom trainings that CloudEdge offers. I'll let you know how to connect to CloudEdge for the classroom trainings at in the last slide. You can also use practice tests by CloudEdge to practice the certification exam in the study mode or the time-based testing mode, right? So there are multiple ways to prepare for this certification, right? Let's look at some of the sample questions, something that all of us are waiting for, right? The way we are going to flow in the next segment is I'll narrate a question, I'll give you some options, I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about the options, and then we'll discuss the correct answer. Okay. Okay, so let's see the first sample question. Which layer from the following is not part of a Lambda architecture? There is option A is batch layer, option B is serving layer, option C is speed layer, and option D is real-time layer, right? Which of them is not a layer is in a Lambda architecture? The correct answer is D, real-time. There are batch layers for batch processing. There are serving layers to view the batch process data. There is speed layer where we actually do real-time processing, but there is no layer named real-time layer, right? Let's move to the next question. Next question says, which approach would be best to transfer the data from SQL Server into flat files in folders and then use AZ copy to transfer the data to blob store? The options are bulk copy program, SSH file transfer protocol, hypertext transfer protocol, or Nutella, right? The correct answer is bulk copy program. Bulk copy program is something that you can utilize to convert your SQL Server file, SQL Server's data to a flat file and then use AZ copy to transfer the data to blob store, right? Let's go to the next one. The next question says, one of the organization has a requirement which requires planetary scaling of your data. Which solution should be included as a part of your architecture, or which service will you use as part of your architecture? The options are Cosmos DB, Azure SQL Database, Azure Blob Store or Data Lake Store Gen 2, or an Azure Storage Account. The correct answer is Cosmos DB. Cosmos DB is globally distributed database solution by Azure, which exposes multiple APIs for you to talk to your database. If you have table queries mentioned, you can use table APIs. If you are looking for time series data, you use your Cassandra APIs. If you have a document API is already created, you use the MongoDB API. If you have relational database in place, you can use your SQL APIs with Cosmos DB, right? So Cosmos DB is the correct answer, which gives you a globally replicated database for you to utilize, and multiple APIs are available for you to query the data from Cosmos DB, right? Let's move ahead to the next question. Among the following technologies, which Azure technology cannot be used to fulfill the batch layer of a Lambda architecture? The options are Azure Stream Analytics, Azure Databricks with Kafka, Azure Kafka or Storm on HD Insight. The correct answer is Azure Stream Analytics. Stream Analytics is mostly used for real-time processing of your data. You can process your data in real time using Stream Analytics. You cannot use Stream Analytics for your batch layer, whereas Databricks can be used with batch layer along with Kafka, and HD Insight also can be used for batch processing, right? Let's move to the next one. Which feature of Synapse Analytics, which was formerly known as a SQL Data Warehouse, helps in ingesting data stored in other formats, which is not in SQL, to the data warehouse? Options are polyglot, multi-master feature, the polybase feature, or the storage account feature of your data warehouse. The correct answer is polybase. Polybase is a feature that does not worry about which format the data it is putting up. It will ingest the data in SQL format to Synapse Analytics, right? Let's move on to the next one. Which service lets you assign and register devices to specific Azure IoT Hub endpoints at scale? Option A, IoT Hub Register Service. Option B, IoT Hub Device Provisioning Service. Option C, IoT Hub Device Monitor. Option D, IoT Hub Administration Service. The correct answer is IoT Hub Device Provisioning Service. That's the one that lets you assign and register multiple devices to a particular IoT Hub endpoint. Correct. Let's move to the next question. Which path stores all incoming data in its raw form and performs batch processing on the data with respect to Lambda architecture? This question does not have Lambda architecture incorporated, but as I stated earlier, there is only one architecture which has different kind of path, which is the Lambda architecture. So you have to read in between the lines when in some of the questions when Azure asks them, right? The options are a hot path, a cold path, a warm path, or an ice path. The answer is cold path. Cold path is where you do all the batch processing, the batch layer sits and your long-term data storage sits in there, right? So the correct answer is cold path, for which lets you store all the incoming data in its raw form to perform the batch processing later on, right? Now, when we began the webinar, in the introduction of the certification and in general information about the certification, I stated that there are questions which will be of diagram type, right? So the next question is of a diagram type, right? You will be presented with a particular diagram where you will have to answer based on the diagram. So the question is, the above architecture diagram is designed to simulate the taxi company, how the taxi company collects the data about each and every trip, right? Cosmos DB has multiple APIs to choose from. Which API will you choose to fit in the given scenario? Whether it is core SQL API, Cassandra API, MongoDB API or Gremlin API when you are trying to visualize a time series data? The correct answer is the Cassandra API, because Cassandra API is the API which can analyze time series data or which can be used for time series data, right? With that, I come to an end on my webinar. Thank you so much for attending the webinar. If you have any questions with respect to the webinar, please reach out to us on sales@clouddebt.in or the provided phone number on your screen, or you can visit us on www.clouddebt.in. Right? Thank you so much for spending 1.5 hours with me. Right? I hope you are at home and you have, all of you, given the COVID-19 scare, all of you have been given, most of the organization have given work from home, and you will be able to utilize this time to prepare for your DP-201 and attend it. You need not, I want to repeat it again, you need not go to a test center to appear for your examination. You can actually give your examination sitting in your own home by using Pearson's online examination or Pearson's online proctoring. Again, thank you so much for the time that you have spent with me. Thank you for attending the webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.